It's Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. And of course, a lot of things are going on in the world, and we'll be talking about the things and more. I see Dr. Sharif has joined me, but definitely we'll see what's going on in the world and around the world and what things are being reported in the news and what's going on in the nation as well as around the globe. Inflation rose less than expected last month despite Trump's tariffs. So CPI inflation rate or inflation data is muted as tariff impact is limited. That is what is being reported in one of the news stories and all along those lines. And Marines are on standby outside LA as protests pop up across the United States. So there is definitely protests going on, and that is one of the news stories that is being reported in the news on a regular basis, whether it's Los Angeles, whether it is protests that are expected in areas like North Carolina, Virginia, and actually I saw there was protests in DC that involved SNAP and all along those lines. And definitely there was even some local Durham residents that were arrested at that particular protest. Matter of fact, a couple of those had been guests on one of our shows, meaning the Coco McMillan show. I believe that was a couple of years ago and all along those lines. So definitely that is something that is going on and all in that space. And protests grow across the U.S. as people push against Trump's mass deportation policy. So that is something that folks are definitely talking about in the news and around the globe and all along those lines. Russian airstrikes kill 3 in Ukraine as Zelensky warns of evolving drone technology. So Russian drone attack kills 3 and wound 60 in Ukraine's Kharkiv. And Kyiv's historic cathedral damaged in a Russian airstrike. So that is something that we're seeing as well. And police seeking answers as Austria mourns the victims of one of the worst shootings in its history. So Austria's deadliest mass shooting. And some folks are asking who are the Graz victims and the gunmen. So Austria has lots of guns and little gun violence, but new questions. So Austria falls silent for a minute as questions remain about the motive for a deadly school shooting. And Reeves says NHS funding to rise by 3% a year and confirms that it'll be 39 billion pounds for housing. So that's something that is being reported out of the BBC. So definitely that is some increase in spending in that area. And the Trump administration slams the UK over its sanctions on the Israeli ministers. So, as I reported yesterday, UK, Canada, and others impose sanctions on far-right Israeli ministers. So, definitely that's something going on as the U.S. condemns the multi-nation sanctions on the far-right Israeli ministers, and that's definitely something that's going on. And anti-immigrant rioting stretches into the second night in Northern Ireland. So in Northern Ireland, mass rioters attacked the police and torched houses for the second night. Rioting and disorder in Ballymania, North Ireland, sees hate-fueled acts reportedly targeting foreigners. So that is something going on in that area. And Hong Kong police accuse the mobile game of promoting armed revolution. So Hong Kong has banned the Taiwanese video game for promoting an armed revolution. So Reverse Front, Bonfire, Hong Kong bans the seditious mobile games. So definitely that is something that folks are looking at even games being a encouraging notion as to what's going on in the revolutions around the world. And the French doctor says Israeli authorities were abusive to Greta Thunberg. So Greta Thunberg departs Israel on flight to Paris after detention aboard an aid ship. So Greta Thunberg leaves Israel. 8 flotilla activists remain in Israel. So that is something that is being reported in the news as well. And EU faces an uphill battle to pass new Russia sanctions. So Europe heaps hard sanctions on Russia, saying strength is the only language Moscow understands. So Europe delivers a final nail into Putin's gas empire's coffin, according to what Newsweek is reporting. And Netanyahu is under pressure as ultra-Orthodox parties threaten to dissolve. So Israel Knesset set to vote on disbanding its first step to possible elections. So barring a dramatic shift, Haredi political leaders say vote to dissolve Knesset is imminent. So we might see some changes in leadership in Israel as well. And Poland Prime Minister Donald Tusk prepares for a confidence vote. So Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk faces a vote of confidence in Parliament and all along those lines. And South Korea is halting propaganda broadcasts along border with rival North in a move to ease some of the tension there. So South Korea turns off speakers blasting K-pop into North Korea. So there might be some less tension in that part of the world. And Hungarians declare resistance to Orban's government with a large protest. So definitely that's something that is being reported in the news as well. So definitely lots going on around the globe and around the nation as well, as U.S. cities are bracing for more protests as parts of Los Angeles have been placed under curfew. And L.A. police enforce curfew as Trump vows to liberate the city. And a tamer night in downtown Los Angeles as the Los Angeles Police Department makes more arrests and enforces the curfew. So definitely there's a curfew there. And from Los Angeles to Washington, Trump is leaning in as commander in chief. This isn't an isolated incident, according to The Guardian. Trump's show of military force in LA was years in the making, according to some experts. And Trump dances with soldiers at Fort Bragg as crowd erupts into a patriotic USA chant, and all along those lines. And there was also a report that I saw where apparently in the middle of his speech, he stopped to tend or have somebody tend to a woman that might have been having either heat stroke or something else going on, but he did send medics to her attention and everything. And I think that he did something like that similarly during the campaign season, if memory is serving me correct and everything. So a missing 21-year-old Navy sailor has been found dead. Another sailor is in custody. Navy search for the missing 21-year-old seaman ends with a tragic discovery, and a sailor has been detained in Virginia. So Navy sailor Angelina Residines was found dead after vanishing from Virginia barracks, and another sailor has been detained. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott is to deploy the National Guard across the state due to protests. So Texas Governor has ordered National Guard to deploy for protests in San Antonio, and so definitely that is something we're seeing as well. And Newsom says Trump is destroying the U.S. democracy in a speech on L.A. protests. So stand up. Newsom rallies the Trump resistance with a new video, and downtown L.A. Curfew goes into effect after California Governor Gavin Newsom addresses the ICE protests. So definitely there's a lot going on in that space. Trump says U.S.-China trade deal is done. Trump says China tariffs will stay high after 2 days of talk. And Trump says U.S. gets rare earth minerals from China in the trade deal, and tariffs on Chinese goods go to 55%. So it looks like there will be some easing of export curbs, and definitely it looks like the truce might be alive in that case. And they went too far. Musk says he regrets some of his posts about Trump. Elon Musk says he regrets some posts he made about Donald Trump. Elon Musk said some of those posts went too far, and that he regrets some of the things that he said in those posts. And Sherrill and Citarelli win New Jersey and gubernatorial primaries. So definitely Trump looms large, and there are signs of Democratic enthusiasm. So it ought to be an interesting race in that particular area. And U.S. immigration officials raid a meat production plant in Omaha. Dozens were detained. I know that I think it was in New York. They had raided a Home Depot. So definitely South Omaha businesses empty amid the ICE operations. So definitely ICE is doing a lot of operations around the country. And U.S. court agrees to keep Trump's tariff intact as appeals get underway. Trump's tariffs may remain in effect while appeals proceed, according to the U.S. appeals court rules that are out there. So definitely a lot's going on in that space. And Democratic governors are seeking to roll back state-funded health care for undocumented workers. So Minnesota lawmakers grit teeth and pass a state budget in a crammed special session. So definitely that's a lot going on. And the GOP can't agree whether Trump's bill would shrink or grow the deficit. So Senate Republicans plan to release a major revisions to the Trump's tax bill. And Republican senators to watch, there are several of those apparently in the maneuvering over Trump's big bill. And Trump says he plans to phase out FEMA after the 2025 hurricane season. So as hurricane season ramps up, Trump is giving FEMA the USAID treatment. So Trump says governors should be able to handle disasters without FEMA. So it looks like he's doing that. And he's also restoring the name of several bases changed under Biden. So Trump orders names restored to Army bases that had been honoring Confederate leaders. So Trump says he's restoring the original Confederate names of several Army bases, but with new namesakes. So Trump announced his plans to restore the Fort Rucker name, and there might be some, and there are others as well. So definitely, it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. And like I said, more than 80 protesters arrested as demonstrators marched through lower Manhattan amid Trump immigration crackdown. And New Jersey Representative LaMonica McGeever indicted following ICE protests. A U.S. Congresswoman LaMonica McGeever is indicted for impeding law enforcement. So definitely there's a lot going on in this space of the protest. And it looks like this will be continuing for a while in various cities. Even cars drives through anti-ICE protesters as Chicago joins the nationwide anti-ICE unrest amid the Trump crackdown. So a car plowed through Chicago protests as thousands rallied in solidarity with the LA anti-ICE protests. So definitely we'll see what goes on in that area. And the Wall Street Journal is reporting that HHS is moving to restore public trust in vaccines. RFK Jr. swears he won't appoint a load of cranks to his vaccine panel and all along those lines. So definitely it'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. So I'm going to bring in my fellow panelists and see what they've got on their minds and all along those lines. So I know that I've got Rick Rosner with me. I've got John from Canada. I've got Sharif from Bangladesh. And I've got Sasha Starr. So you heard some of the stories that were reported and what's on y'all's minds based on some of those stories. The big one seems to be the protests are growing around the country.
I mean, it's not a lot different today than yesterday in terms of what we're talking about. Trump's
Yeah.
still being a dick. He made that address yesterday at Fort Bragg where he said he saved LA, which he, of course, didn't. The late night comedians are, calling his actions a complete farce. Um, Terry Moran from ABC called Stephen Miller a world class hater. Moran has been with ABC for 30 years,
Yeah.
and he puts out one tweet where, and that is largely truthful, and ABC kissing Trump's ass fires him, which
And apparently,
is a shame.
and apparently Bob Costas, a longtime sports anchor, also got in trouble for some comments that he made as well that were unfavorable of Trump. And he still might be with the network, or he might have been fired as well. But I do know that Bob Costas ran into trouble by saying some unfavorable things about Trump also. So yeah, definitely it looks like there's some
Well,
people
well,
might say,
last night Kimmel said that we knew he was going to be a dick, but that how the dickishness coming from Trump is surprising even people who were ready for him to be a dick.
yeah. That's definitely what's going on. And of course, we still got the war going on in Ukraine and Russia. And like I said, there was a lot of those bombings going and everything like that. So, what is your take on that situation, Sasha? I know that you've been following that story. And of course, we do have our show every Tuesday and Friday. But I did see that one of the cathedrals had been hit, and there was some other very sad news coming out of Ukraine. So, what is your take on the latest efforts in the war efforts?
Uh, okay, my take is very simple. Since Trump does not comment on this vicious bombardment and killings of civilians in Ukraine, I think this is his grand plan to get capitulation of Ukraine. That's his grand plan to do business with Putin. That's what he's determined to do in spite of the Senate and House and majority of American people and majority of world leaders. It doesn't matter. That's what he's determined to do. And since there is no peace possible because Putin doesn't want to stop the war, so how to do it? Very simple. Make capitulation of Ukraine possible. How to do it? Get Putin everyday bombardment and killing of civilians every single day and make it more and more grandiose until Ukraine will have no way to continue the war under this scenario. U.S. Does not help Ukraine, not diplomatically, no financially, no with the weapons or anything at all. So it's only Europeans who are really helping Ukraine, and not only because they wish to help Ukraine, but for their selfish reasons. I understand, and there was analysis of German think tank that between 5 and 8 years, Russia will attack Western Europe, NATO. They will start probing very soon, preferably once Ukrainian war is stopped. They will start probing NATO for the Article 5. Especially now, it's quite obvious that US is no longer willing to abide by NATO and probably will abandon it completely. So Russia is going to start probing Article 5. We'll see what's happened. So the Western Europe is doing a very credible job of arming themselves against Russian aggression, helping Ukraine as much as they can. U.S. is a pariah in the world. I mean, the world is despising U.S. as you never believe. I was in Europe. I was talking to people. People hate U.S. more than Hitler, more than anything, because Hitler, this was a European phenomena, but the U.S. is U.S. phenomenon. There is nothing you can do about it. So you have to live with that for another 3.5 years. And the best way is to forget about it. China is forging alliances all over the world as U.S. with the stupid sanctions, and he has to give up on every sanction against every country. So this is becoming unbearable even for U.S. citizens.
So for Americans visiting Europe, Europeans don't hate Americans. They hate Trump, right?
You know, it's hard to say. They hate Trump for sure. They hate America for sure. Now, you're talking about Americans in Europe. If you're in Europe and you're behaving well, so on, I don't think that they will personally hate you just because you're happening to be American. But one thing you must be aware, which even a few years ago it was not the case, they do not accept American dollars. It's just no. So if you're buying something and you want to offer and pay by American dollars, it's not even a question of exchange rate. They just don't accept it at any rate. What they say is go to the nearest bank, exchange your US dollars to euros, come back, complete transaction. Thank you.
Well, but they will take credit cards because credit card
Yes,
most modern.
they do. Yes, they do take credit cards.
Will they take crypto? Because apparently Trump is big into crypto and everything. He's got his own crypto and everything like that. So are the people in Europe, because I know there are a couple of European countries and some others, I think in Latin America, that were looking at crypto as a unit of currency. So are they taking crypto from what you saw in Europe, or are they off the crypto train?
Mark, this is a wishful thinking on some supporters of crypto. No establishment in Europe that I've seen around, I'm talking about hotels, restaurants, shops, airlines, no one taking crypto, period. Not at all. So you have to wait another 30, maybe 45 years until it will be taken in.
Yeah, that's
Maybe
interesting.
you will be still around, I think, at that time, right?
I hope to be. Like I said, no one never knows. I'm in my 60s now, so hopefully I'll be making it into the 90s and all along those lines. But
Yeah, that's the way to do it. Yeah.
yeah, so we'll
Oh,
see
oh,
what
by the way,
happens.
just I won't be here tomorrow. I'll be getting a colonoscopy, so I'll still be on camera, but it'll just be inside my butt.
It'll be inside. You'll be getting the colonoscopy and everything like that. There was a TikTok superstar called Cabby Lane that apparently was detained by ICE before being allowed to leave the U.S. and everything like that. And there's even a pro-Trump Gen Z influencer that is taking credit for helping ICE detain this TikTok star and everything like that. So looks like they might be targeting some of the celebrities as well, not just
That,
the.
that guy that I think is the most popular TikToker in the world with 162 million followers.
Yes. Yes, he's supposed to be one of the world's most popular. Matter of fact, he is the world's most popular TikToker, but he's been forced to leave the U.S. and all along those lines. Because I guess he was saying some things that Trump didn't like and all in that space. So it ought to be interesting to see what happens. I saw that the Shadow was watching as he's been doing the last couple of days and everything like that, and he was having this notion that maybe Trump wants to change the flag to the Confederate flag and all along those lines. And he did say that he was going to change a couple of army bases back to their original names that were honoring in the past Confederate generals. So, Jacoby, what's your take on this? Are we just going to go back to Trump being a pro-Confederacy, or what's happening with this mess?
I mean, again, also just a correction: the guy that you're talking about, the TikToker, he was actually made famous via a meme. He was the most famous meme individual. Then started doing TikTok stuff and everything else, but that's where he got famous. And yes, he's one of the richest out there. And he's being kicked out. He's black. Let's just be honest. So, and that leads into the question that you just asked about the Confederate flag. Well, he's defended the waving of the Confederate flag or the Confederate battle flag for a while now, because that he was able to pick up a voting block, and that was the people who voted. Not every person who voted for Trump, because this is where we get into those nuanced conversations, which always make it confuses me when pointing out that those who swung around the Confederate battle flag voted for Trump. Doesn't mean everybody who voted for Trump waved the Confederate battle flag, but that becomes the argument that they want to use against anybody who points this out, because then it goes down the whole road of, well, you're saying everybody who voted for Trump is racist. No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm pointing out is that voting bloc voted for him for a particular reason, just like everybody else. And he found that, defending that flag and defending the things around that flag. Heck, look at Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller is a self-proclaimed white nationalist. And we have to actually stop getting into the semantics of things and saying white nationalist, because a white nationalist is a white supremacist in the first place. It's just another variation of it. But again, that Confederate flag, he's defended that flag before. And if somebody puts it on there and it's going to get him more votes, he's going to do it, because that's what Trump does.
Hey, Jacoby, I'm confused about something, because a couple of those white nationalists, they aren't exactly all white, because like Fontes is partially Latin American. I think he's like a third or fourth Mexican or something like that. And there's a couple of other ones that are not totally white nationalists. So don't they realize that they would be the first ones that would get evicted if there was like a major situation? Because when I read that, and I read that a couple of times, that Nick Fontes has got I think it's a Mexican, it's either his mother or his dad is half Mexican and everything like that. So don't they realize?
Now, Mark, that's just an old thing that's been there forever. I mean, doesn't Candace Owens realize when she's going out there pushing the white supremacist talking points that she'd be the first one to go? What about Jason Whitlock? What about Byron Donalds, who went out and proclaimed that, yes, the black family was great up under Jim Crow? Sure. So Nick Fuentes, The people
Enrique Tarrio, one of the Proud Boys, is like, yeah,
exactly. It's just
it's a combination of delusion and strategy, because like Candace Owens has made a pretty healthy career out of working for the man.
the funny thing about Candace Owens, and this is the crazy part, because she found that it was a lucrative business. There's a guy actually on this side of town who I debate with regularly on social media. What's his name? Jimmy Haycock or whatever. Used to play for Carolina. You should invite him on. He's found a lucrative business in selling that hatefulness. But yeah, Candace Owens, always find it funny about Candace Owens going to Congress saying there's no racism. That's just all this. When she was the one who sued and won, claiming there was racism. So that tells you it's about the money. And then once they find the money, then they have to try and believe it, and then they get trapped in it. And yeah, everything Rick said is right.
Yeah, but I gotta say that conservatism has valid points. It's just that those points are completely obliterated by MAGA idiocy. I grew up in a Republican household, and my parents were not idiots, and they weren't mean assholes either. They just, they leaned Republican, but the old school Republicanism and the principles of conservatism have been just erased by the MAGAs. So you can be black and be politically conservative. It's senseless to be black and MAGA. But again, I'm not the boss of anybody. But Jesus
well, the thing
Christ.
is, what you're saying is everything. This is why I typically talk about. I don't like talking about the. This is Democrat. This is liberal. This is conservative. When we're placing each other in a box, then we forget that, hey, we all have a myriad of ideas and values that are different from particular area. I mean, there are things in the Republican side that are fine. There's conservative values. Most African Americans have more fiscally conservative views. But the thing is, there are a lot of other things that come along with, hey, if I'm going to vote for MAGA just because I want to raise money, or I want to make sure that the taxes are low and blah, 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 blah. That brings some extra stuff, especially now when you have Trump trying to pull, for example, when he closes Job Corps, which affects the minority communities more so than anything. When you push for a heavy-handed law presence in terms of where the black community is the one that gets over-policed more so than any community. So you have these issues that come along with it, but this is why it's all about more so policy that you have to look at and the things that are affecting and how it affects different people more so than saying, well, all conservatives are bad. And that's what we're running into right now. If you think about it, if the reason why the Democrat Party is polling low is because it's become a brand that is burned, and everybody who is a Democrat, and this is why I will argue till I'm blue in the face, that nobody was going to win the election versus Trump when the quote unquote assassination attempt happened. Why? Because the brand got burned. Then you have everybody sympathetic to Trump, and anything that he says doesn't matter anymore because, they tried to kill him. So everything that he told us about, they never want him and they're trying to take him out, it begins to seep in, and it didn't matter who got thrown out. But if you look at the policies, because if people legitimately voted on the policies, people looked at the policies of what Kamala Harris was talking about and what Joe Biden was talking about and what the Democrats were talking about. So when we're talking about, the Democrats are so much in flux, they need to find all this stuff, they need to figure it out. No, they were just fine until that one inflection point in the election. It's the same thing with Hillary Clinton. Everything was fine until that one inflection point where when Comey released the emails. But everybody forgets that Comey came out a week later, 2 weeks later, and said it really wasn't anything. So
there's another problem with Democrats, which is when MAGA and the Republicans move into the loony corner, that leaves the rest of the board for Democrats, and Democrats don't know where to stand because it's such a big freaking tent. You've got like the far, far left lunatics that you have to try to keep, and the Bernie bros, and you got to keep them satisfied. On the other hand, you have, conservative Democrats, and it's too much territory to cover, and the brand doesn't have
I will actually push back on that. I think the problem isn't that the tent is too big. I think the problem is that the tent is searching for somebody to speak for it, and everybody in the tent wants somebody else to speak, rather than the tent saying, hey, that gentleman and that group isn't what I'm talking about. And just because this person here isn't saying everything in the correct manner that I want to say, but he's actually pushing policies that I want, and this tent wants the same policies that I'm talking about, I should go ahead and vote for this individual who's representing my tent, and not, hey, he's not the perfect person or she's not the perfect person. So that's the toughest part about the Democrat Party now, is that we're looking for that the party is looking for a savior.
And just tell me, we got a question that came from the shadow, but before I get to that and everything along those lines, the other thing that Trump has become a master at, and we've talked about it on this show a couple of times, is that even when he gives a rambling speech, and there are several people that said the speech, and I did not watch it, at Fort Bragg was rambling and everything, but he finds a notion or something that happens that turns sympathy toward him. And I think that this happened once during the campaign, but it happened again at Fort Bragg. So, I mean, it's in the middle of summer. So it's it's technically, I guess we're not quite in summer, but late spring and everything like that. But it was definitely some hot weather out there. And there was probably a woman that was possibly suffering from a heat stroke or something else. And he noticed that. So he sent the first aid people over there, which then got him a lot of sympathy. And I remember something similar happened at one of the campaign rallies. So he oftentimes will see something going on, and then he will direct the sympathy toward people to kind of be a distraction and everything. And that's what that is.
So we've got this question you mentioned from the shadow. Right. Can't the governors of the states withhold a federal income tax? And that way we could bring him to his knees. Well, there's no mechanism to do that. California is a net giver state. Our taxes give the federal government $83 billion more than we receive back from the federal government. So yeah, if we somehow withdrew our tax money from the feds, they'd take a major hit, and we'd have a ton more money to spend on ourselves, but there's no mechanism for that. Now, somebody could try to build a mechanism, some kind of escrow account, that instead of paying the IRS, you pay it to California, and the money sits, being held until we have normal federal government again. But that would be against the law. It would have to go through it would be, kind of like the firing on Fort Sumter. It would be the first step in secession.
You see, the difference between Trump and other politicians is that Trump is extremely skillful with social media, with getting people to do what he wants them to do, breaking the laws, but the way he breaks the law is extremely difficult, nearly impossible to punish him. So he's on the borderline, and he is willing to take a risk, believing that he will go through all the obstacles and achieve his goal. No Democrats are able or willing to do that. So then intrinsically, Trump, as much as I hate him, he is above the head and shoulders and everything of all Democrats put together. Democrats have to find a leader. Today they don't have a leader, they have nothing.
Actually, I'll say it's a little bit different. Trump came from entertainment. Trump has a myth that's built about him. Oh, he's this great businessman. No, if you actually look at his business record, if Trump never or if ABC never picked him up to do the Apprentice, Trump would be a failed businessman. Had Trump not been in movies, Trump would be a failed businessman. The thing is, there was a myth built around him. So what happened was everybody believed, oh, Trump is this great dude. So, when he becomes president, he's going to make it all this is going to be perfect. So it wasn't anything. There is no other politician out there that came from that whole movie background. Sans, you got take out Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan came from that. What did everybody think? He was this great man and all this other stuff. But he had that built-in popularity base that was already sold on whatever and whoever he was. And even in TV, because he said these crude things, people allowed it to come through. So if there were, for example, if there were some Democrat or some politician for the Democrats who came from some background where they had this whole built up idea around it. That's why the thought of The Rock, if The Rock were, run as a Democrat, he'd win. Why? Because of the Jon Stewart.
Let me disagree with you, because neither Clinton nor Obama, they were from entertainment industry, and yet they were successful 2 terms presidents. So that's not the case that if you're coming from entertainment background, then you have it all. That's not.
Well, a couple things about Trump and entertainment. The reason he said yes to The Apprentice is because he got the opportunity is because they approached a bunch of business people, and most legitimate business people said, no, I don't have time for this garbage, because Trump is kind of a half-assed business guy with running a 4-person office and a blowhard. He said, yeah, I'll do this. And he was scripted for all the seasons of The Apprentice. So he had writers helping him sound like not a frickin' idiot. Also, he was lucky. If Anthony Weiner didn't have a compulsion about sexting underage girls, the FBI doesn't reopen the investigation into Hillary, because Anthony Weiner was using his wife's laptop to send filthy messages and pictures of his dick to underage girls, and his wife was Hillary Clinton's chief of staff. So incredibly unlucky for Hillary based on this one guy, and then the shot, the assassin, the luckiest shot in the world for Trump. It hits his ear. It lets him pop back up and throw his fist in the air. At a quarter inch either way, it either misses him or it really, hurts him badly.
And again, that became a show. And that's what I'm talking about, Sasha, is that Trump is a showman. That's it. And because he is a showman, everything he's done on his campaign is, hey, we're going to make a show out of it. This whole thing going on in LA right now, it's a show. This the assassination attempt, both of them shows. So all this stuff begins to be sold and is bought in by those who follow him and those who were on the fence. So once that show is bought, and once you buy that ticket and are locked in for the rest of the way, you're enjoying that ticket.
So how Clinton and Obama were winning twice each presidency without having background in show business or anything?
Because people are reasonable. They want like a reasonable leader, though that leader has to have a minimum standard of charisma. And Bill Clinton, very charismatic. Obama, very charming. But, Obama got played a lot for not wanting to go head-to-head against the Republicans. He didn't.
At this time, and in our day and age right now, because things are different now, Obama and Clinton would not win back-to-back terms. They wouldn't. It just wouldn't happen because of the way that our society is set and our political landscape is. And this is why it's tough, because I was saying something to somebody the other day who's complaining that the Democrats aren't doing this and the Democrats aren't doing that. the tough part about the Democrats is you have Trump at what Mark was talking about. Mark, just to point out, what you were talking about oh well, he finds something sympathetic at a rally. No, he doesn't. The man rambles about wives and all the other stuff, but it doesn't matter what he says. It's because he shows this great energy. Oh, he's big. He's manly man. It doesn't matter. All he has to do is not truthfully go out there and say the N-word. And even then, he might be able to get away with it.
You call Trump a showman. Hugh Jackman's a showman. Martin Short's a showman. Beyonce's a freaking showman. Trump is a crappy showman. It's just that he's propped up by the backlash against Obama, this big chunk of the population that doesn't want to see Whitey turn into a minority presence in America, and Fox News. He's propped up. He's not good at being a showman, but he's helped by all these other factors.
Again, you have to take the fan base that he's built, that huge fan base that was built from his time in show business. Then he takes that showman on the road. Some people who are on the line, on the border about, the Democrats and Joe Biden and blah, 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 blah. They buy into it. Then they buy exactly what John just put up there. He's a con man. So he sells this show. In the backside, he's conning those people. I mean, that's why he's into Bitcoin now. He's conning people into buying his meme coin, and then he's already sold it. These people have already lost.
But he's not a good con man. He's bad at all this stuff, but he's propped up. Ted Kennedy was kind of a con man. Ted Kennedy killed a woman. He drove a car into a lake and swam away, let the woman drown. And yet his political career lasted another 40 years or so. Ted Kennedy comes from a family of smooth talk. Bill Clinton, managed to hold on to his popularity even after the jizz-stained dress. His popularity went up. So, Trump does not have the charm or the savvy of a lot of politicians. But he's got these factors, these environmental factors coming along right when social media gets pretty good at manipulating people's opinions. Most Americans know, even his supporters know he's full of crap.
Yeah, but Rick, and you brought it up, and actually Sasha brought it up as well, and everything. But sloganism isn't new, because everything along those lines. Because to Sasha's point and everything, they did win, and part of their victory, meaning both both Obama and Clinton, was around a sloganism that was out there. I think for Clinton it was hope and everything like that, and it was definitely some other kind of like slogans that resonated with people that got Obama elected as well. I remember being part of those campaigns, and definitely people attached themselves to those slogans. So we can't say that they did not have that kind of show business element. They might not have come from show business, but they did have a show business kind of element to their campaigns, and those campaigns were successful.
Yeah, but when you look back at the history of political slogans, when you look back at the ones from the 19th century, you're like, holy crap, these are terrible. These are bad. How did they persuade anybody? It's because people weren't sophisticated. They weren't immune to stuff. The Nazis were the first political party who made widespread use of modern PR techniques. Right. And it was very effective because people did not know what they were getting. And the Germans and the Jews, they got lied to, way more professionally and skillfully than any set of citizens ever before. And we've got a whole new medium, social media, and a whole new set like algorithms. There weren't algorithms before, and to target people. In 10 years, the techniques used in 2016 that helped Trump win, we'll look back on that and be like, holy crap, these are so amateurish. Yeah. But we're just not immune yet.
Yeah, I agree with you on that and everything. Just really quickly, I did see your hand, Sasha. But one of the other things I was going to get to, and he did say he was getting ready to get rid of it because this is about to be hurricane season in the southeast and around the country and everything. So, what is our thoughts around this notion of getting rid of FEMA, much the way he got rid of USAID and everything? Because it does look like this is something that he's seriously thinking about doing in after this particular season. And FEMA is something that a lot of people depend on in terms of getting aid after the hurricane hits or whatever the natural disaster is, because we also saw that in the Louisiana, in New Orleans after Katrina and a number of other incidents that they had and everything. So what's our take on this? Is there any real fear that FEMA is going to go bye-bye?
Yeah, it's a ticket to chaos. FEMA has been politicized for, since Katrina. Yeah. And right, I mean, it would people, because they did a bad job with Katrina. And then with North Carolina last year, when the disaster happens, it's tough to get aid in there. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to politicize it, then any difficulty you have, you can say because Biden was crappy. And then there were some FEMA people under Biden who are like, do not go to the doors of disaster victims who have Trump signage. And this was a bad move, but this guy was, because it's like, don't go to telling a mailman, don't go to the door of somebody with Rottweiler dogs in their front yard. He said, avoid the MAGAs because, you might get assaulted or something. Bad move, and it was used against, but it's going to be a ticket to dysfunction.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Speaking of messaging and everything like that, and maybe Jacoby or John has got some ideas on this. There was a big protest. Reverend Barber did it yesterday around SNAP and some of the aid that a lot of people that are in the disability communities or the differently abled communities have to deal with and everything like that. But I'm just thinking to myself, isn't it a bad image when one of the people that you arrest is literally in a wheelchair? And it was one of the Durham residents. She's actually part of a group called Meek Squad, which is a musical group and everything like that. But I'm just wondering, are some of these arrests going to turn against even his supporters and everything like that? Because I'm thinking to myself, if you are there and you see somebody that is got cerebral palsy, that is differently abled and everything, and that's one of the arrested folks.
There's an excuse structure now. Anytime you see or the 4-year-old girl who needs chemo to survive getting deported, even though she's a citizen, all that, when MAGAs hear that, they say, no, that's a false flag. That's some bullshit to make us feel sorry for these immigrants who are mostly MS-13 gangsters. And, you got to break some eggs. So there, after 9 years of Trump, his supporters have built an excuse structure where the Democrats, and I've read essays about this, are waiting for outrage to sweep away some MAGA support. That's not happening because the people who are hardcore MAGAs and even middle-core MAGAs, they've had 9 years to become appalled by it. Then they're not getting appalled.
They don't care. Trump tells them what to care about. That's everything you said, Rick, is right. They don't care that the 4-year-old or the U.S. Marshal or anybody gets swept up in this because, as you said, they do have an excuse structure. And then on top of that, they'll come up with whatever whataboutism they can create in their mind. Well, Obama did. We're not talking about Obama. That was years ago. No, they'll come up with any excuse structure, any excuse to defend anything Trump does.
Plus, they don't hear about it.
Care.
They don't hear about the 4-year-old.
But they don't hear about the 4-year-old. They might, but they probably didn't hear about the young lady from.
No. They've heard about the 4-year-old. They've heard about the U.S. Marshal. Matter of fact, there's a dude who jumped on my Facebook to argue with me that because somebody pointed out the U.S. Marshal and the 4-year-old. You know what that person said? We don't know their background. They could be. We don't know. He's a U.S. Marshal and the 4-year-old. So they they legitimately do not care because Trump told them not to care.
So tell me, do they care about the disability advocate that is literally in a wheelchair and everything, that is from Durham, North Carolina, and is still in her wheelchair and everything like that? Do they care about this individual?
That is why it is so tough in this political climate for a Democrat to really succeed. I mean, you really have to be loud and proud every single day, but also so loud you're not ticking somebody off because they're going to say you're too loud. But yet Trump can go out there bombastically and say all this craziness, and then his MAGA group, again, doesn't care about anybody with disabilities, doesn't care about the facts or the numbers because the excuse structure is built. They bought into the cult mentality, and that's it.
John brought up an
this
interesting
morning
point.
This morning on the news, they had footage of ICE agents in full, all their gear running between the rows of crops in a field and chasing down agricultural workers and tackling them. People who are picking strawberries, they're not MS-13, they're fruit pickers. And the footage of people, it looks ridiculous because you don't expect to see guys in full like camo and helmets, like tearing between rows of crops and taking, Pedro freaking to the ground. But no, it's not going to change anybody's mind.
Do you expect people to be at a Home Depot? Because I think in Los Angeles, they literally rolled
No,
into
I
a
mean,
Home Depot.
Everybody knows freaking Home Depot that there's the guys waiting at the corner of the lot. And you pay them $50 and they help you unload your sacks of cement. And they're not MS-13. They're guys who lift stuff.
They do not care at all. I mean, if you listen to, listening to Republican strategists like a Scott Jennings, for example. Oh, they came into the country. That means they're illegal. They broke the law. It's what you're telling me is wrong in the first place. And so they go down this whole line that, they're criminals. They're, as you said, it's an excuse structure. And as John points out, it is cult mentality. No matter if that child is 4 years old struggling with cancer, or the individual is in the middle of the field, or the individual is going to his court hearing on immigration, ICE is showing up and attacking people. And the people that are supposed to care and that are supposed to be upset at these things, they voted for Trump and they don't care because Trump told them not to care. I mean, I'm glad that there are parts of the Latino community that are finally saying, well, we screwed up voting for this dude. So like the Venezuelans, some other individuals, part of that Latin community, they started feeling upset about it and starting to get upset about their vote. But it's too late now. You need to change stuff.
John has a thing.
Because that community has personally been negatively affected and impacted. Until that happens to most of the base, the cult will continue. And at some point, the cult will realize, wait a second, and probably it's going to take a while. I didn't vote for this. I didn't vote for any of this crap. But even that, until it negatively impacts themselves or their families, it's a cult.
The head of Latinos for Trump has recently said, this is not what I wanted.
And John is right. Until it affects
them. Can you get enough people who are disgruntled to turn out in 2026?
Right. And it's hard and because they realize now they've been conned, right? And accepting that psychologically is very, very hard.
The best way for the Democrats to actually respond to this is to point out the con and say, you voted for, this is what you got. You were lied to, but so let's figure it out and how to work together because this is what we're trying to offer.
So Trump started his term with net 7% approval. 7% more Americans approved than disapproved. And that's gone negative. But even after all the craziness, he's only at 2.5% negative.
I'll give you this though, Rick. If you put a frog in water and slowly turn up that heat, are they going to know that they're boiling by the time it's boiling?
Well, the
So
people
that's the
who
thing
know,
that I'm
people
thinking
who
that
know
is going on.
frogs say that people who know frogs say that it's a myth that a frog will jump out of the water.
Oh yeah,
But
it's a myth. But that's still that analogy.
But well, here's what's going on with polling. There was a polling company called 538. Everybody used it. It collected and averaged all the polls and was fairly even-handed. ABC bought it. And then ABC shut it down right before the election. And now you have to go to Real Clear Polling to see an average of all the polls, except that Real Clear Polling is a conservative organization, and they include all these crap pollsters who still have Trump at plus 10 approval. You've got like frickin' Qantas Insights and Trafalgar Group and Rasmussen, all these pollsters who were kicked out of 538 for being crappy and biased, they're included in the polls. So they tilt the average towards Trump because the more
if you look at how authoritarian governments and all this other stuff, the parallels that are going on by controlling the media, by suing it to a point where it only reports good things. So all the polls that you're talking about, why do you think 538 was gone? Why do you think all this stuff is happening? Why did ABC shut it down? They were trying to do a deal at that point and getting sued. All this stuff. So he's controlling the media. Now he's trying to control the different educational institutions. So now he can put out whatever. The government, he's already telling people, if you're going to be a new hire, you got to write good things about Trump and MAGA. So
you got to write an essay, and that's what they're saying you got to do. But along those lines, I did see your hand, John, and everything along those lines. But just really quickly, he's also, and I think you alluded to it, Rick, a master at manipulation and everything. Because when I looked at the faces at the Fort Bragg, we know that the Army and the military is oftentimes significantly has a significant population of minorities. And I looked at that list and those faces, and a lot of those people I don't think voted for Trump, but they were in the there because it was a good image for him, because there was a lot of black people that were there in that picture.
You saw his speech yesterday at Fort Bragg. It was a sea of white guys with thick necks. I assume that they were picked to be behind. I assume whoever ends up behind Trump at one of his rallies or speeches is screened a little bit to make sure you don't get somebody like me who says, "Oh yeah, I'm totally Trump," and then holds up a sign that says, "Suck my dick."
But that's what I'm saying. I mean, the ones that were in the audience that were immediately with him, yes, it was mostly white. But if you look further into the audience, there was a lot of black and brown people that were in that audience as well, and everything, because that's what makes up the military. So
yeah, but the guys right behind him had a
were very white.
Here's a question. Again, in the military, what was Pete Hegseth taken down? You still got Mein Kampf that's still available in the libraries, but you got stories about Harriet Tubman that are removed. So why would he put any black and brown people behind him?
Right. Good point. John, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, until the Nikkis of the world stop posting on, say, his personal Facebook pages, MAGA and trans community, until people like that, smart people that should know better, until they realize that perhaps they made a mistake in trusting Trump, this will continue. And I'm an optimist. I'm a belligerent optimist. That will happen. So.
Yeah. Hopefully that'll happen. We're right at the top of the hour and everything like that. So we'll be back with some more discussions about these rallies and more on tomorrow. And we'll see who else might join us. And Jatovi, if you want to send me that gentleman that you argued with email, I'll gladly invite him to the show and everything like that. So see if he wants to come on.
I think you're friends with him on Facebook. Jimmy Haithcock, I think it is, whatever his name is.
I'll look and see if I'm friends with him on Facebook. And if so, I'll reach out to him and see if he wants to join.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.